I need to read the skill file and check the names list before writing. The names to avoid are Eleanor, Harold, Brittany, Walter, Margaret Whitfield, Tyler, Brandon, Devon Pratt, Vivian, Nolan, Diane, Dorothy, Patricia, Carson, Richard, Carolyn, Lorraine, Ashley, Kelsey, Gerald, June, Suzanne, Amanda, Ivy, Caleb, Sandra, Frank, Miriam, Evelyn, Joel, Renata, Douglas, Loretta, Cora, Pamela, Keith, Cecile, Aubrey, Philip, Gloria, Iris, Nora, Anne, Becca. Now I'll write the story. I keep a small ceramic rooster on my kitchen windowsill. My late husband bought it at a flea market in Chattanooga back in 1987, paid $2 for it, and carried it home wrapped in his jacket like it was made of gold. I never liked it much, honestly. But after he passed, I stopped being able to throw anything away that still smelled like a decision he made, so the rooster stays. And every morning when I make my coffee, I look at it and I think, Bernard would have handled this so much better than I did. I'm 69 years old. I spent 32 years as a registered nurse at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio, floor nurse, then charge nurse, then the last 11 years in the cardiac unit. I've held the hands of people taking their last breath. I've stayed calm when everything around me was falling apart. I know how to read a situation, how to stay level when someone else is panicking. I thought that made me wise. Turns out, it just made me patient in the wrong direction. My name is Ruth, and this is the story of the 2 years I spent being a human ATM for my son and his wife, and the Thanksgiving that finally woke me up. My son Garrett is 41. He's a good-looking man, got his father's jaw and my stubbornness, which is a combination that served him well in some rooms and gotten him into trouble in others. His wife, Melissa, is 38. She grew up in Worthington, which is the kind of suburb where the houses all have 3-car garages and the kids play travel soccer, starting at age 6. I don't say that to be unkind. I say it because it explains some things about her relationship with money, specifically other people's money. They have 2 children. My granddaughter Penny is 9, sharp as a tack, already reading chapter books. My grandson Cooper is 6 and still at the age where he thinks Grandma's house smells like cookies even when I haven't baked anything. Those 2 children are the reason I stayed quiet for as long as I did. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't weakness. It was love, pointed in the wrong direction. Bernard died in March of 2021. Pancreatic cancer, which moves fast and doesn't negotiate. We had 8 weeks between the diagnosis and the funeral, and I spent most of them either at the hospital or at the kitchen table trying to make sense of paperwork. He was 67. We had plans. We were going to drive Route 66 the following summer. He'd already bought a road atlas and put sticky notes on 17 stops. The grief was. It's hard to explain grief to someone who hasn't sat with it yet. It doesn't come in waves the way people say. It comes in ambushes. You're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And then you're in the cereal aisle at Kroger, and you see the brand he liked and your knees go soft and you have to grab the shelf. Garrett and Melissa were attentive at first. They came over on Sundays. They called during the week. Melissa would bring casseroles in glass dishes that I always washed and returned promptly, because that's how I was raised. About 4 months after the funeral, Garrett sat down with me at the kitchen table and explained that Melissa's hours had been cut at her marketing job. Not fired, just reduced, and that their monthly budget was tight. He was working in commercial HVAC installation. Solid work, but not salaried, so a slow quarter hit them hard. They were worried about making the mortgage on their house in Dublin. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The mortgage was $2,340 a month. I started covering half. I told myself it was temporary, just until Melissa's hours came back, or Garrett picked up more contracts. Bernard had left me in a decent position. The house was paid off. I had my pension, his life insurance, and our savings. I wasn't wealthy, but I was stable. Helping didn't hurt me. And honestly, it gave me somewhere to put the grief. Useful grief is easier to carry than useless grief. Here's what I didn't understand then. There is a version of kindness that teaches people what you're worth to them, and once they learn it, it's very hard to unteach. The mortgage help stretched past 3 months, 6 months, a year. Melissa's hours came back, but by then the justification had shifted. Childcare costs, Penny's after-school program, Cooper's speech therapy appointments, which were real and necessary, and I was glad to help with. Then Cooper's therapy ended, but there was a new expense, Penny's private school application. They wanted to enroll her at Westbrook Academy, which runs about $14,000 a year for middle school. Garrett explained it was a better environment, more individual attention. The teachers were excellent. I agreed to help with half the tuition. That was $7,000 a year, spread across monthly payments of about $583. Then there was the car. Melissa's Honda had 140,000 miles on it and needed transmission work that cost more than the car was worth. They bought a used Acura. The payment was $420 a month. Garrett asked if I could take that on for a year, just until he got a raise he was expecting. I said yes. I want you to understand, none of these conversations felt like manipulation in the moment. Each one was reasonable in isolation. Each one had a logical explanation. I was a nurse for 32 years. I know what it is to triage. I was triaging my son's family, telling myself I was helping them through a hard stretch, that it would level off. It didn't level off. By the spring of 2023, I was putting out roughly $20 and $100 a month between the mortgage contribution, the school tuition payment, and the car. My pension is $3,400 a month. You can do the math. What I was receiving in return was Sunday dinners. Sometimes, phone calls, occasionally, and the quiet, persistent sense that when I sat at their table, I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. Little things. The way Melissa would glance at her phone while I was talking. The way Garrett would change the subject when I mentioned Bernard, like grief had an expiration date he'd already marked on the calendar. The way Penny and Cooper would be ushered off to their rooms after dinner, before I'd had a chance to really talk with them. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I told myself they were busy, stressed, tired. I told myself a lot of things. The Thanksgiving conversation happened on a Tuesday in early November. I remember because I'd just gotten home from my water aerobics class. I go Tuesdays and Thursdays at the rec center, and I was still in my coat when my phone rang. It was Garrett. He started with small talk, asked how I was, mentioned that Cooper had lost his first tooth. Then there was a pause that I recognized from 30 years of nursing as the pause before someone tells you something they've been rehearsing. "Mom," he said, "I want to talk to you about Thanksgiving. We'd always done Thanksgiving at my house or at theirs, alternating. This year was supposed to be theirs. I'd already been thinking about what pie to bring. Bernard's mother's recipe for sweet potato pie that I've made every year since 1991. "Of course," I said. "What time should I come?" Another pause. "That's the thing. Melissa and I have been talking, and we thought this year we'd do something smaller, just the 4 of us and her parents. It's been a stressful year, and we just need something low-key." I stood there in my coat, by the front door. "Low-key," I said. "It's not personal, Mum. It's just, you know how holidays get. There's a lot of moving pieces, and honestly, sometimes the energy gets." He stopped. "You can be a lot, Mum. Sometimes. You don't always realize it. I can be a lot. I am a woman who ate lunch standing up for 30 years because there wasn't time to sit. I'm a woman who administered CPR in a hallway at 2 in the morning without flinching. I'm a woman who planned her husband's funeral, wrote the obituary, greeted hundreds of people at the viewing, and then drove home alone and made herself a sandwich because that's what you do. I can be a lot," I repeated very quietly. "We just need this one to be calm. You understand. I said that I understood. I said it very clearly. And then I got off the phone and sat down on the floor of my entryway, still in my coat, with my back against the front door, and I did not cry. I was past crying. I was somewhere on the other side of crying, in a place that was very still and very clear. I sat there for probably 20 minutes. Then I got up, went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and looked at the ceramic rooster. Bernard, I thought. I think I'd been very stupid. I didn't make any dramatic phone calls. I didn't send a long email. I didn't do anything that night except think. What I thought about was a conversation I'd had with my friend Helen about a year earlier. Helen is 72, lives over in Bexley, and she's the kind of woman who has seen enough of life to speak plainly about it. She'd said to me after I mentioned I was helping Garrett with some bills, "Ruth, you can love your children and still require them to stand on their own feet. Those two things are not in conflict." I'd noted and changed the subject at the time. I thought about Helen's words for a long time that night. The next morning, I called my bank. I asked about stopping the automatic transfers I had set up, one to Garrett's account for the mortgage contribution, and one set up to auto-pay the car loan. The woman on the phone was very matter-of-fact about it. She told me exactly what to do, walked me through it in about 4 minutes. I'd been making those transfers for nearly 2 years, and I could stop them with 4 minutes and a phone call. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Carol who handled Bernard's estate and who I'd stayed in touch with. I told her I wanted to review my will and my financial arrangements. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I wanted to know where I stood legally in terms of what I was doing voluntarily and what could ever be claimed as an obligation. Carol asked me a few careful questions and then said, "Ruth, voluntary gifting can sometimes create informal expectations that are difficult to manage. You have every right to stop at any time. There is no legal obligation here. Every right to stop at any time." I wrote that down on a notepad and put it on the kitchen table. Then I called Helen and asked if she wanted to have lunch that Friday. "I'll cook," she said immediately. "I'd like that," I said. I didn't make the November transfers. I didn't call Garrett to announce it. I just didn't make them. It took 11 days. 11 days before Garrett called. And when he did, I could hear in his voice that he'd already checked the account, already confirmed what he was thinking, and had been sitting with it for at least a day before working up to the call. "Mom, the transfer didn't go through this month." "I know," I said. A beat of silence. "Is everything okay?" "With the account." "The account is fine," I said. I decided to stop the transfers. The silence this time was longer. "You, what, why?" Without even telling us. And here is where I want to be honest about something. I had rehearsed this conversation. I'd gone over it in the shower, on my walks, while I was making dinner. I knew what I wanted to say, and I knew how I wanted to say it, clearly, without anger, without drama. "Garrett," I said, "I've been contributing about $20 less than $100 a month to your household for nearly 2 years. That's over $48,000. And 2 weeks ago you told me I couldn't come to Thanksgiving because I'm, how did you put it, too much?" "Mum, that was about the holiday. It wasn't—" "I know what it was about," I said, "and I've thought about it a great deal. I love you and I love those children, but I'm 69 years old and I spent everything I had taking care of other people my whole career. I need to take care of myself now. The transfers were voluntary. I've decided to stop them." He tried several approaches. He started with hurt. "I can't believe you'd do this without even talking to me." He moved to practical. "Mum, we have payments set up around that money." He escalated to frustrated. "This is exactly the kind of thing Melissa was talking about. You make everything about yourself." That last one landed differently than he intended it to. "If taking care of my own finances is making it about myself," I said, "then yes, I suppose I'm doing that." We ended the call without resolution. He was angry. I was calm. That was new. Melissa called the next day. I'll give her this. She's smart, and she knew enough to start differently than Garrett had. She opened warm, asked how I was doing, mentioned that Penny had been asking about me. Then she circled to it. The transfers, the car payment especially, because the loan was due in 2 weeks. I understand you're upset about Thanksgiving, she said, and I hear you. Maybe we handled that badly. But this affects the kids too, Ruth. Penny's tuition is on auto pay for next month. And if the car payment doesn't go through, it goes on Garrett's credit. I understand that, I said. So you'll reinstate the transfers? No, I said, I won't. There was a sharp intake of breath. Ruth, Melissa, I have been paying over $2,000 a month into your household. I've been glad to help. But I was uninvited from Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago, and I've had some time to think about the arrangement we've had. It doesn't feel equitable to me anymore. We didn't uninvite you, Garrett told me I could be a lot, and that you needed something low-key. That's an uninvitation, Melissa, even if it's a polite one. She pivoted then, tried a softer approach, talked about how much stress they'd been under, how Garrett's work had been unpredictable, how she hoped I understood. I did understand. I also understood that I had been absorbing the stress of their lives financially while being treated socially as optional. I told her I loved her and that I loved the children and that I hoped we could find a better rhythm going forward. I told her my door was open. Then I got off the phone. I will not pretend the next few weeks were easy. They weren't. Garrett called twice more, once to try a different version of the practical argument, once, and this was the one that hurt, to tell me that I was being selfish and that his father would be disappointed in me. Bernard, he said, always put family first. I held the phone for a long moment after that. Your father, I said finally, put family first, and your father also believed, very strongly, that adults take care of themselves. He would have told you the same thing I'm telling you now. I'm not sure Garrett believed me. I'm not sure he wanted to. Melissa's parents apparently stepped up. I heard through a cousin, we have a big family, newsmoos, that they covered the November car payment and helped with the tuition, which told me everything I needed to know about how optional I actually was. Thanksgiving came and went. I went to Helen's. She cooked a turkey breast, and we had stuffing and sweet potato pie. I brought the pie, and we sat at her kitchen table for 4 hours and talked about everything and nothing. Her neighbor Gwen came over around 4, and her daughter stopped in around 6. It was small and warm, and nobody made me feel like a disruption. I thought I would feel sad. I was surprised to find I mostly felt relieved. In December, Garrett sent me a text asking if I wanted to come to the kids' school Christmas pageant. It was the first contact that wasn't about the money. I said yes. I sat in a folding chair in a school gymnasium and watched Cooper forget his one line and then recover by waving enthusiastically at me across the room. I watched Penny sing with absolute seriousness, like it was Carnegie Hall. I cried a little, the good kind. Garrett sat next to me and didn't say much, but at one point he handed me his program to hold while he took off his coat. And when I handed it back, he said, "Thanks, Mum," and there was something in his voice that was quieter than it had been on the phone. We didn't talk about the money. Not that night. In January, Garrett came over alone. Melissa stayed home with the kids, and we sat at the kitchen table. He had coffee, I had tea. He was quiet for a while, turning the mug in his hands the way his father used to do when he was gathering words. "I think," he said slowly, "that we got used to things that we shouldn't have gotten used to. I waited. And I think I let Melissa take the lead on a lot of stuff that I should have, I don't know, thought through more myself." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was honest, and at 69 I have learned to value honesty over form. "I love you, Garrett," I said. "I want to be part of your lives, your children's lives. Not as a bank account, as a person." He nodded. He looked tired and a little younger than his 41 years, the way people look when they've been carrying something they finally set down. "Yeah," he said, I know. It's April now. Things are not perfect. I want to be clear about that because I think we do each other a disservice when we wrap these stories up too neatly. Melissa and I are cordial. She's warmer than she was, and I try to come without an agenda when I visit. Garrett has taken on more contracts and they seem to be managing their bills on their own, which I think is better for all of us, including them. I have given myself a few things this year that I had deferred for too long. I booked a trip to Savannah in February with Helen. We stayed in a bed and breakfast near Forsyth Park, ate shrimp and grits at a place with no reservations and a line out the door, walked until our feet hurt, and talked the whole time. I slept better those 4 nights than I had in 2 years. I adopted a cat. His name is Gerald. No, wait, I cannot use that name. It's on the list. His name is Otto. He is a large orange tabby who came from the shelter already named, and I saw no reason to change it. He sleeps on Bernard's side of the bed, and I find that I don't mind. I go to my water aerobics class. I have lunch with Helen. I call Penny on her birthday, and we talk for a long time about her books. Cooper drew me a picture of a rooster. He saw the ceramic one on the windowsill when he visited, and it hangs on my refrigerator now. The ceramic one and the paper one. Bernard's and Cooper's. I think about what I would say to someone who's where I was 2 years ago, quietly hemorrhaging money into a situation that was taking everything and giving back very little, telling themselves it's temporary, it's love, it's what you do for family. I would say love is not a financial transaction, but some people will treat it like one if you let them. And the moment you stop letting them, you will find out very quickly what was real. I would say you are allowed to require that your presence be valued, not just your deposits. I would say call your bank. The process takes about 4 minutes. Everything after that is harder but also better. The ceramic rooster is still on the windowsill. This morning when I made my coffee and looked at it, I thought, Bernard, I think I finally got there. The road atlas is still on the bookshelf. 17 sticky notes. Maybe Helen and I will do a piece of Route 66 this fall. I've been thinking about it. I think I will. I've been thinking lately about cause and effect, not in any grand philosophical way, just the plain, quiet truth of it. What you allow continues. What you never question never changes. I allowed a lot for a long time, and I told myself it was love, and some of it was, but some of it was something else. A fear of being unnecessary, of being the grandmother who only shows up at Christmas and slowly becomes a stranger. I kept writing checks because I thought money was the thread holding me to them. It wasn't. It was never that. What I understand now, sitting here with Otto on my lap and a cup of tea going cold on the table, is that I handed Garrett and Melissa a version of me that was easy to take for granted. Not because they were cruel people. I don't think they are, but because I never asked them to see me as anything other than available. When you make yourself endlessly useful and endlessly accommodating, people stop wondering whether you're okay. They just assume you are because you keep showing up, keep transferring, keep saying yes. The Thanksgiving call cracked something open in me that I think needed cracking. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. Standing there in my coat by the front door, hearing my son tell me I was too much, that's not a small thing to absorb. But here's what I've come to believe. Sometimes the moment that humiliates you is also the moment that frees you. I needed something to be clear enough that I couldn't soften it anymore, couldn't explain it away or file it under "they're just stressed." That phone call was clear. And what I did afterward, stopping the transfers, calling Carol, going to Helen's for lunch, none of it felt like revenge. People keep using that word when they hear stories like mine, and I understand why, but it wasn't that. It was just me, finally, making a decision that was about my life instead of theirs. That's not revenge. That's just being a person. The tricky thing about integrity is that it requires you to act even when acting is uncomfortable. It would have been easier to keep the transfers going, to swallow the Thanksgiving thing, to tell myself that being present for the kids' Christmas pageant was worth whatever indignities came with the arrangement. Easier, yes. But I've watched too many people, patients, friends, even colleagues, spend their later years in quiet resentment because they kept choosing easy over honest. I didn't want that. I had already lost Bernard. I wasn't going to lose myself on top of it. What I want, if there's someone reading this or listening who recognizes any piece of this story, a child who calls when there's a need and goes quiet otherwise, a family that schedules you out of the holidays but never out of the bank transfers, what I want to say to you is this: clarity is not unkindness. Requiring your presence to be valued is not selfishness. You spent decades building a life, raising people, showing up. You are allowed to ask that the people you love show up for you too, not with money, just with genuine regard. The rooster is still on the windowsill. Cooper's drawing is still on the refrigerator. January came and Garrett sat at my table and said something honest for the first time in a long time. That's not a perfect ending, but it's a real one, and at 69, I'll take real over perfect every time.